Welcome, class, to another audio podcast. Today, I'll give you a brief summary of your reading The Origins of Anti Mexican Sentiments in the United States by Raymond Paredes. This is one of my favorite chapters, even though I know some of you may find it long. But perhaps that's part of being a historian, learning to enjoy digging deeply into these complex histories. What's important for us to recognize is that these attitudes didn't end in the 19th century. The same anti Mexican and anti Latinx sentiments continue to echo in US history, shaping immigration policy and public opinion. When we look at the current attacks on Latino immigrants through deportation policies, racialized rhetoric about the border crisis, and the criminalization of migrant communities, we can see the long shadow of these earlier prejudices. The chapter begins by examining early relations between Anglo Americans and Mexicanos in the 19th century, especially in Texas. As you learned from Professor Jacobo's lecture on the Mexican Colonization Act, the Mexican government invited Anglo Americans to settle in Texas. But from the very beginning, many Anglos arrived with attitudes of expansion, land grabbing, and a belief in manifest destiny. This belief was almost religious in nature. The idea that Anglo Americans had been chosen by God to spread democracy and occupy the continent from east to west. At that time, Tejanos in Texas were primarily white criollos, descendants of Spaniards born in Mexico. Although considered white, their whiteness was different from Anglo Saxon whiteness. By the 1820s, Anglos brought with them negative stereotypes, viewing Spaniards as dirty, corrupt, and tied to a corrupt Catholic Church. This anti Catholic sentiment and broader Hispanophobia are central themes in Paredes' analysis. To understand this, we have to go back further in history. When the English began settling in America, they were already deeply anti Catholic. For over 50 years during the Protestant Reformation, England and Spain had been in conflict. The English denounced Catholic practices as blasphemous, accused the clergy of ignorance and superstition, and even claimed the Pope was the Antichrist. The famous clash of the Spanish Armada in 1588, when Spain failed to invade England, only intensified this hatred. Adding to this hostility was the work of Bartolomé de las Casas, a Spanish friar who wrote about the brutalities committed by Spanish conquistadors against indigenous peoples. His writings contributed to what became known as the Black Legend, a powerful narrative that the English used as propaganda to condemn Spain and fuel anti-Spanish sentiment in the New World. Paredes also explores how ideas about race shaped these prejudices. When the English traveled to Africa during the slave trade, they became fixated on skin color, associating blackness with ugliness and inferiority. On a racial scale, Northern Europeans were considered the most beautiful, while Africans were at the bottom. Spaniards who had mixed with Moors during centuries of Muslim rule in Spain were also placed low on this hierarchy. In English eyes, Spaniards were impure, both racially and religiously. Puritan settlers in the colonies reinforced these ideas through literature. Works like John Fox's Book of Martyrs portrayed Catholics as persecutors, while William Bradford's of Plymouth Plantation described Spaniards as threats to true believers. For over a century, English colonists in the Americas battled Spain, combining political conflict with religious and racial hostility. When it came to Mexico, Europeans often had contradictory views. On one hand, writers admired the sophistication of the Aztecs. The architecture of Tenochtitlan, for example, was compared to the great cities of Europe. On the other hand, they condemned the Aztec religion as barbaric because of practices like human sacrifice. This dual perception painted Mexicans as both advanced and depraved. For Anglo Americans, the most powerful stereotype was that Spaniards had mixed with indigenous peoples, producing a population they viewed as unstable, impulsive, and incapable of progress. By the time Anglos arrived in Texas, they already carried these racist ideas. Many historians argue that the US Mexico War of 1846 was heavily influenced by these racial prejudices. That's all for now. I look forward to reviewing another important chapter with you soon.